Imagine this. A small country in Northern Europe where people spend more time with family, outdoors, and on vacations than at work. Yet they still take home some of the highest paychecks in the world. Sounds impossible, right? Now here's the twist. While much of the world pushes for longer hours to boost productivity, Norway does the opposite and somehow ends up richer. In fact, Norwegians work fewer hours than almost anyone else on earth and still enjoy one of the highest standards of living. So how do they do it? How can a nation work less, stress less, and still earn more? Well, the truth is far more fascinating than you might think. In this video, I'll uncover the real reasons behind Norway's work-life balance miracle and why it's a model that could change the way we think about success itself. Let's dive right in. When you look at the numbers, Norway doesn't just bend the rules, it smashes them. The average Norwegian works about 1,400 hours per year. To put that into perspective, the average American clocks in around 1,770 hours. That's a difference of nearly 370 hours a year, or more than 9 extra weeks of full-time work. 9 weeks? Imagine what you could do with that time. Travel, learn a skill, or simply catch up on sleep. Yet somehow, Norwegians aren't falling behind, they're pulling ahead. It's the same story when you compare them to other so-called productive nations. South Korea, over 1,900 hours a year, Japan, around 1,600, even Germany, famous for its efficiency, works more than Norway on average. And yet, Norway's GDP per capita regularly sits among the top 5 in the world, beating countries where workdays are longer and pressure is higher. It almost feels like cheating, as if Norway has stumbled onto a hidden economic hack that the rest of the world hasn't figured out. But this isn't just about money, it's about quality of life. In Norway, the concept of work to live truly exists. People spend their afternoons hiking in the mountains, evenings with friends and family, and weekends in cozy cabins by the fjords. There's a sense that life outside of work matters just as much, if not more, than the job itself. That mindset isn't accidental. It's built into the culture, the economy, and even government policies. Of course, critics might say, well, that's easy when you are sitting on oil. And yes, Norway's natural resources play a role, but that's not the full story. Plenty of resource-rich countries still struggle with poverty and inequality. Norway's secret isn't just what it has, it's what it does with it. Here's the real puzzle. In most economies, shorter hours often mean lower wages, slower growth, and fewer opportunities. But in Norway, the opposite is true. High wages, generous benefits, and short working weeks all exist side by side. The result? A workforce that's happier, healthier, and ironically, often more productive during the hours they do work. This leads to a deeper question. If Norwegians are working fewer hours, where is all that wealth coming from? And how has the country avoided the economic slowdown that usually comes with less labor? The answer lies in a combination of history, resources, and some very smart decision-making that stretches back decades. It's a story that takes us from the icy waters of the Northern Sea to the global stock markets, and it's not just about oil. Because as you'll see, Norway's wealth isn't built on working harder or longer. It's built on something far more strategic. And once you understand it, you might start to question whether the way most of the world works is completely backwards. To understand Norway's success, we first need to see where it stands in the global picture. And the view from the top is breathtaking. Norway consistently ranks among the richest countries on earth, with a GDP per capita often above $90,000. That's higher than the United States, the United Kingdom, and even Germany. In fact, if Norway were a contestant in a global wealth competition, it would be on the podium almost every single year. And remember, this is a nation of just over 5 million people. That's smaller than many cities. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. The countries Norway outperforms aren't slouches. These are economic heavyweights with massive industries, world-class universities, and high-tech manufacturing. Yet many of them still work longer hours for less reward. So clearly something is different here. It's also not just about raw wealth. Norway pairs that economic power with some of the highest living standards anywhere in the world. Healthcare is free, education is free, infrastructure is modern and reliable, public transport works, corruption is almost non-existent, and the safety net is so strong that losing your job isn't a life-shattering event, it's a temporary setback. If you're thinking this sounds too good to be true, you're not alone. Economists have been scratching their heads for years, trying to pinpoint exactly how Norway manages to balance high wages, short work hours, and strong public services. And while there's no single magic formula, the roots of the answer start to appear when you zoom out, not just across Europe, but across the entire globe. Because when you compare Norway to other high-income nations, one thing becomes obvious. It's not just competing with them, it's quietly surpassing them in key areas. Productivity per hour worked is higher, wages are stronger when adjusted for cost of living, and the country's unemployment rate stays low even during global recessions. That kind of stability isn't luck. It's the result of decades of deliberate choices that started long before most of today's workforce was even born. But perhaps the most important turning point in Norway's modern history came in the late 1960s, when a discovery beneath the icy waters of the North Sea would change the nation's destiny forever. And this is where the real story begins. Because while other countries have struck oil and squandered it, Norway found a way to turn a finite resource into a seemingly endless source of national wealth. The question is, how did they avoid the mistakes that so many resource-rich nations have made before them? The year was 1969, and a drilling team working in the North Sea hit something big, very big. Beneath the cold, choppy waters lay one of the largest oil fields ever discovered in Europe, the Ekofisk field. For Norway, a country that had relied mostly on fishing, shipping, and small-scale manufacturing, this was nothing short of a jackpot. Overnight, the nation went from modest coastal economy to potential energy powerhouse. But here's the twist. Oil wealth has been both a blessing and a curse for countries throughout history. Some have ridden the wave to prosperity, but many have crashed into what economists call the resource curse, where sudden riches lead to corruption, inequality, and eventual economic collapse once the resource runs out. Think of countries whose fortunes boomed with oil but crumbled when prices fell or reserves dried up. Norway could have easily gone down that path, but instead of rushing to spend the oil profits, the government took a slower, more cautious approach. They imposed strict rules on how the oil industry would operate, ensure it wouldn't dominate or distort the rest of the economy. Foreign companies were allowed to invest and operate, but under Norway's terms. That meant Norwegian jobs, Norwegian taxes, and Norwegian oversight. Oil profits didn't just disappear into private pockets either. The state claimed a significant share of the revenue through ownership stakes and heavy taxation of oil companies. This money didn't get funneled into political vanity projects or reckless spending. It was earmarked for the long game. And here's where Norway's thinking was radically different. They knew the oil wouldn't last forever. So instead of treating it like an endless stream of cash, they treated it like a one-time opportunity to secure the country's future. It was as if the nation had found a giant pile of gold but decided not to spend it, at least not right away. This mindset led to the creation of one of the smartest financial strategies in modern history, a strategy that would turn Norway's oil discovery into a permanent source of income for generations to come. It's a strategy so successful that today it's studied by economists and envied by politicians around the world. But to see just how brilliant it was, we need to look at what Norway did next. How they took billions in oil profits and transformed them into something far more stable than any oil well could ever provide. In 1990, Norway made a decision that would cement its place among the wealthiest nations for decades to come. They created the Government Pension Fund Global, better known as Norway's Sovereign Wealth Fund. At first glance, the name makes it sound like a simple retirement account, but in reality, it's the largest of its kind in the world, holding well over $1 trillion in assets. That's more than $250,000 for every man, woman, and child in Norway. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Take the profits from oil and gas, invest them globally, and only spend a tiny fraction every year. The rest would stay in the fund, compounding over time. This way, even when the oil runs out or when the price drops, the country will still have a steady stream of income. And they really do invest globally. The fund owns pieces of thousands of companies in over 70 countries, everything from tech giants in Silicon Valley to renewable energy projects in Asia. It also invests in real estate, government bonds, and infrastructure. If you have ever walked through Times Square in New York or Oxford Street in London, there is a chance you've passed a building partly owned by Norway. But here's the part that makes it truly remarkable. The fund is managed with strict transparency and ethical guidelines. It avoids companies involved in corruption, human rights abuses, or environmental destruction. Every single investment is publicly listed, and Norwegians can literally go online and see exactly where their country's money is. The rules for using this money are equally disciplined. By law, the government can only spend about 3% of the fund's value each year on the national budget. That might not sound like much, but when you're talking about $1 trillion fund, 3% is still tens of billions of dollars, enough to fund public services, infrastructure, and social programs without raising taxes or going into debt. This approach has insulated Norway from the wild swings of the oil market. When prices crash, the economy doesn't spiral into crisis because the wealth fund keeps the government budget stable. When prices soar, the extra profits just make the fund even bigger. It's like having a massive, never-ending safety net that grows stronger over time. And yet, even with all this wealth, Norway hasn't fallen into the trap of thinking money is the only measure of success. Because there is another layer to this story, one that explains how Norwegians manage to enjoy such high salaries while working some of the shortest hours in the developed world. If Norway's oil and wealth fund explained how the country got rich, its approach to work explains how it stays happy. At the heart of Norway's success is a philosophy that life is not meant to be dominated by the office. The standard full-time work week in Norway is 37.5 hours, already shorter than in many countries, but in practice, it's often even less. Long hours aren't worn as a badge of honor here, they're seen as a sign that something's gone wrong. Employers and employees alike value efficiency during the day so people can go home on time. And when vacations come around, Norwegians take them. A minimum of 25 paid days off a year plus public holidays is the norm. This isn't just generosity, it's part of a deliberate system. Strong labor unions ensure fair pay and reasonable hours, and collective bargaining agreements set industry-wide standards. These agreements cover not just wages but also working conditions, benefits, and job security. It means that no matter your job, whether you are a teacher, an engineer, or a shop assistant, you can expect a decent living wage and predictable hours. There is also a deep cultural respect for personal time. Emails after work, rare. Weekend phone calls from the boss, almost unheard of. Even politicians and CEOs are expected to unplug when they are off the clock. This creates a clear separation between work and life, reducing burnout and keeping productivity high when people are actually on the job. And because the basics of life, healthcare, education, children, are publicly funded and high quality, Norwegians didn't have to work extra hours just to afford the essentials. When you're not crushed by student debt, medical bills, or the fear of losing your job, it's much easier to focus on doing your work well during the day and then leaving it behind at night. The result is a society where shorter hours don't mean lower output. In fact, Norway consistently ranks among the most productive countries per hour worked. That's the paradox. By working less, Norwegians actually get more done, and they get to enjoy the rewards while they still have the energy to live their lives. It's a model that challenges the assumptions of much of the world, where success is often measured by how busy you are or how late you stay at the office. Norway's example asks a different question. What's the point of being rich as a country if your people are too tired to enjoy it?